Hello, Luke. How are you today?
Good, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. Are you in the path of the hurricane?
No, thank God.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a lot of students who are. It's hitting now. It's starting to affect people. Yeah, I also have a son and grandkids who live in Florida, right in the way of it. So we got to watch out. It's great to see everybody. Zion, my rule when you eat in class is that you have to bring enough for everyone. So we have to share your pizza with the whole group. Yep.
I think, I mean, people, yeah, I'm not willing to do
That's all right. All right. Anybody have any questions? All right, let's dig right into class today then. Well, no, we were just talking about the hurricane. Luke and I, are any of you guys affected by it? No, good. I
my
do have,
grand my grandparents live in Augusta, so their like town got hit bad. It was
yeah.
really bad. And there was a tree that fell on their house and it tore down the wall. Yeah. And
Oh,
then
wow.
um their water pipes got cut off, their gas pipes got cut off because there's a tree in their front yard that like is super big, so it tore out the pipes with it.
Yeah.
And there's just like this big sinkhole in their yard now.
Wow. Yeah. Water can do a lot of damage. So can wind. You put the two of them together and can be very devastating. All right. Can you guys all see that where it says biology there? All right. Wonderful. So what we're going to talk about today is waste and recycling. So before we leave behind ecology altogether, I want to talk about really what happens to the stuff that you put in the trash can. So think about it. Think about just yourself. Think about the amount of waste that you make every day, the trash that you throw away. Now, your family, and at the end of the week, you bag up your trash and you take it out and you put it in those trash containers. What happens then? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So, of course, when we're talking about ecology, we're not just talking about the way organisms relate to one another. We're talking about the way they relate to their physical surroundings, because living things are all affected by what other living things do. So I want to start this discussion with a mockumentary. Anybody ever heard that term before? Mockumentary? You know what a documentary is, right? A documentary is like a hopefully fact-based commentary about an issue. Well, a mockumentary is sort of a tongue-in-cheek, sort of a fun way. And you'll see what I mean in just a second. But it also has a really powerful message for us. So this is a mockumentary about a plastic bag. Let's watch this.
The open plains of the asphalt jungle, home to many creatures great and small, and the popping ground for one of the most clever and illustrious creatures, the plastic bag. Today we explore the cycle of life for this curious creature, the plastic bag, on its migration to its home, the Pacific Ocean. Once released into the wild, the plastic bag is unsure of itself. It falters at first, but soon, with some help from the wind, the bag will be airborne. This flight will be the first in its long journey towards its final destination, the garbage patch in the heart of the Pacific Ocean. Using the wind to guide it, the plastic bag moves across the city through the air. A city park. This park may at first seem an idyllic place for the plastic bag, but danger lurks round every corner. Here it will encounter many enemies, including one of the most dangerous, park services. Poor little fellow. Looks like his journey ends here. Meanwhile, our little bag has encountered one of nature's most deadly killers, the teacup Yorkie. Once the Yorkie has locked onto its victim, there's very little hope of survival. But using its superior size and deft maneuvering, our bag manages to escape the Yorkie's talons and flee for its life. Over the course of its miraculous migration, the plastic bag will cover vast distances through neighborhoods, across parks, and down city streets. It is now nightfall, and our highly advanced night vision cameras have managed to capture for the first time in history a plastic bag in pitch black. Phenomenal. The vast cement rivers of California, home to literally dozens of animals. Many plastic bags will not make it out of here. The reeds and branches will see to that. As at home in water as it is on land or in the air, the bag's natural buoyancy makes it an excellent swimmer. It's close now, and it can feel it. At last, the bag has reached the gateway to the open sea. Careful to avoid the mouths of hungry sea life that feed on the helpless plastic, the bag will travel hundreds of miles to join the thriving community of plastic known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. The Garbage Patch is a veritable plastic oasis where millions of tons of plastic garbage remain trapped by the currents. It is said to be twice the size of Texas. Never actually biodegrading, here the plastic bag can live indefinitely, peacefully coexisting with billions of other petroleum species before breaking into ever tinier plastic pieces, thus completing the plastic cycle of life.
All right, so now you know what a mockumentary is, but the message there is pretty clear, right? Plastics don't belong in the ocean. Plastics don't belong in our air. They don't belong on our streets or in our parks. So how do they get there? What happens? All right, well, again, think about what you just by yourself do in a day. If you drink bottled water, you throw the bottle away. If you buy a candy bar, the wrapper goes into the trash. If you go someplace like McDonald's, everything is wrapped and then placed into a bag. And all of that paper and all of that plastic is going to go into the trash. Think about just going into a convenience store. Everything you buy is either wrapped in plastic or paper or metal. And then you're going to use another bag just to carry things to your car. Sometimes that outside bag can be used to carry something for 20 feet from your car to your house, and then it's thrown into the garbage. So all these things that we throw away, they go somewhere. We throw away a lot of different things. We throw away things like food scraps and plastic and paper, glass, even toys and clothes and electronics and furniture, cars. We throw away just about everything that we use eventually goes into the trash. Now, the trash truck comes along and it carries a mixture of all different kinds of materials. Let's talk about what we think is the most. See if you can guess what we throw away the most. 29.4% of what we throw away is what? Anybody have a guess?
Food?
Beth,
Plastic?
you would think so. It's actually not.
Food?
It's not food either.
Paper plates?
Good guesses. Yeah, well, take the plates off the end and you got it, Luke. Paper.
Paper.
Yeah, 29% of what we throw away is made of paper. Now, some of the things that we throw away that are made of paper, in fact, most of the things that we made are paper, do eventually break down in a landfill. So is paper a big issue? Not as much as some of the other things are. What about the next one? Anybody want to guess what the next one is? This will surprise you too. Still not plastic. 12%, 13 almost percent is wood. So a lot of the things that we throw away are made of wood. And that can take up a lot of space. Now, again, things that are made of wood eventually are going to break down. So they are not necessarily going to be as harmful. Then the third one is yard debris. The fourth one is metals. Now we start getting to things that don't break down as easily out in the when they're taken away in the trash truck. Miscellaneous inorganics, that would be things that are never were alive. And inorganic is something that's not now and never was alive. Then we've got textiles. So that would be things like fabric, like clothing and curtains and, sheets and bedspreads and that kind of stuff. Then plastics, finally. And I think that's surprising that only 7% of what we throw away is plastic. The problem is a lot of those other things will break down, but plastic doesn't. Plastic just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Then we have miscellaneous things that were alive. Then finally, food waste and glass. Now, all things like old cars and furniture and electronics, they don't break down and they can fill up a dump really easily. And part of the problem is some things have harmful substances in them that can leak out and pollute the land. So how we get rid of things matters. Plastics, of course, are a big part of the problem because we're just making more and more and more plastic. And they're affecting ecosystems all around the world. Okay, so you throw your trash in your garbage and it has to go somewhere. The trash truck comes along and it picks it up and it takes it somewhere. Where does it take it? What do you think? There's 4 ways that we get rid of trash. Sorry, go ahead.
Landfill.
Landfill's one.
The ocean.
Ocean's another.
Incinerator.
Incinerator or burning is another. Bethany? Not hearing you. Just a dump is another. So we'll talk about what each of these are. These are the 4 main ways that we get rid of trash. Now, ocean dumping, that's where you just throw waste into the ocean. And it wasn't very long ago that a lot of trash, and especially a lot of waste from factories, was just dumped into the ocean. Really, people thought the ocean is so big, it'll never make a difference. But we know now that a lot of living things in the ocean are affected by things that we dump in there. Now, the good news is most of the ocean dumping in the United States has stopped. So when we look at pros and cons, the only real good advantage is that we're not doing much of it anymore. There are other countries, though, that are still dumping into the oceans. And of course, we all share the oceans. So we're all affected by it. All right. Some cons, some things that are negatives about ocean dumping. First of all, it pollutes the water, and that's harmful to the animals and the plants that live there. All right, the second thing, the second way we get rid of trash is with a garbage dump. So this is just a big place where people just dump the trash. Zion.
How long ago did we stop doing ocean dumping?
Well, it's an ongoing process. I don't know when it originally started. There are basically what we did is we passed some laws that said you can't do it anymore. Well, people still do things even if they're against the law, but they're doing it less and less because the fines are pretty steep. So I don't know. You want me to look? Yeah, let's look and see. When ocean dumping. When were laws passed forbidding ocean dumping? Let's see here. Over several decades. So there is a Marine Protection Research and Sanctuaries Act that was passed in 1972.
That's
So
a
since
long time ago.
Yeah, it is a long time ago. So it's been a while. And there are also some around the world. Other countries are working on it. So, it's a good thing. That's why the one pro about it is that we're not doing it anymore because there's really nothing to be gained by dumping things in the ocean. All right, back to the garbage dump now. Garbage dumps are places where they dump trash. Any of you guys want to live next to one? How would you like, instead of a house next door, for there to be a garbage dump next door? Think of the smell. Think of the animals that are going to be attracted to that. Think of every time it rains and water goes down onto that dump, that water is then going to leach into your yard, into your street, into the river near your home. So dumping really just causes more pollution of air and land. So what's the advantage of garbage dumps? I can't think of any. I'm going to say there aren't any advantage. The only advantage might be you get it out of my yard, my house, and take it somewhere else, but I don't think it's a good solution. So some of the disadvantages, they smell bad, they can attract pests, and that water can run off and cause more pollution. So another way is these landfills. Now, these are being used in a lot of cities instead of garbage dumps. And it's pretty interesting science what goes behind making a landfill. Basically, most of the time, a landfill is a very large hole that's in the ground that is lined with sand and some very thick plastic that will contain the groundwater. It'll keep that water from polluting other locations. Now, the lining that they have here, so you can see like this white would be the lining, and then there would be sand here. The lining collects the rainwater, and then they can capture that rainwater. They can take that water out of the landfill and put it into a collection pond and treat it just like sewage water that comes out of your home. And then they can return it to local bodies of water. So that's a good thing. That's a good way to get that water cleaned out. Gases are also made when the food things and the like paper, the organic products begin to rot. It produces these gases. Well, they've found ways to be able to capture that gas, and they can even use it as fuel. So they can use it for electricity and alternate fuel sources. Another good thing about the landfill is that the waste is crushed so that it takes up less space, and it's treated pretty carefully. And then once that landfill is full, once it's filled up, they cover the whole thing over with dirt. Now that's going to keep it from smelling bad. It's going to keep pests like rats and seagulls away. And sometimes they can build things on top of it that have like soil and vegetation. So they can build parks on top of an old landfill and even beautify the land over time. Sometimes the landfills are not down in the ground, but they're actually built on top of the ground. So then they're going to turn the whole thing into a hill, and they're going to fill it up with trash, cover over it, and it'll be a little bit of a hill. So the pros to a landfill, well, it's going to reduce pollution on the land. Because it collects and uses the gas as fuel, that removes pollution from the air. It collects and cleans the water, so that reduces water pollution, and it can reduce smells from open waste just going bad once it's closed up. The disadvantages, money. It's very expensive to build a landfill, and it has to be maintained. Somebody has to get that water out. Somebody has to get the gases out. So that can cost a lot of money both to build and to maintain. And then the last one are these incinerators. Some places just burn their waste in order to get rid of it. But think about burning. If you've ever burned something that really shouldn't throw in a fire, you know the smell that you get, that it can put like smoke into the air. A lot of different materials can give off harmful fumes when they're burned. So it can be kind of dangerous, especially for the air. And burning is expensive. It requires special furnaces to make sure that the burn occurs properly. And even the special furnaces that they use are expensive to build and can lead to pollution. So waste has to be shredded so that it burns, and that takes energy. But it really decreases the volume. What's left is mostly ash. That ash is then carried to another landfill, and sometimes they can use the energy from the burning in order to generate electricity. So that would be an advantage. So the pros, burning reduces the volume a lot, and energy can be used to produce electricity. The cons are the pollution. Burning requires energy, expensive, and waste has to be shredded. All right, so that's how we can get rid of it. Right now, that's what we've got. We don't have any better ways to get rid of our trash. So what are we going to do? What's the solution here? You guys have probably all heard of the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. And when I had that lesson that I asked what you're doing, a lot of you guys mentioned that you're actually just trying to use less and buy less. Well, that's the reduce part. If we can reduce what we buy, then things don't end up in the landfill. Probably the most important part of all this is the reduce. Stopping to think about what we buy before we buy it. Stopping the thought that everything is disposable. Everything can just be replaced. It doesn't matter if I, wear these shoes out in the rain. I'll just throw them away and buy a new pair. all of that reducing that we can do can go a long way, because think about everything that you buy eventually is going to end up in a landfill or a dump or be burned. All right, so that's reducing. Reusing is where you repurpose something. And it really isn't just using it yourself again. It can be giving things away instead of throwing them in the trash. So if you've got things that still have value to them, you've got an old sweater or sweatshirt that isn't, doesn't fit you anymore, give it to someone rather than throwing it into the trash. Think about neighbors. Think about taking things to thrift shops. Even online groups are available. I belong to this community gifting Facebook group where if I don't want, let's say I don't want my water glass anymore. I decide that this isn't what I want. I got a new one for my birthday. So I decide I'm going to get rid of this one. I can put a picture of this on my community gifting group and say, does anybody want this? And somebody will. Somebody will. So that's a way that we can reuse things. And then the big one is recycle of that. We all talk about recycling. It's a little bit more complicated. It's pretty easy to understand what reduce is. It's pretty easy to understand what reuse is, but recycling takes a little more thinking. So raise your hand if you think it's worth it to recycle. Okay, what do you base that view on? What makes you think that?
Well, if we recycle something, then it could be reused.
Often. So they'll take it, basically what they'll do is they'll take it apart or crush it and then reuse it to make something new. So that would be recycling. Yeah. Yeah. So we have to stop and think sometimes about whether or not we're just basing our views on what we've heard or whether we've done any research ourselves. So you might be surprised about some of the things about recycling. It's not as cut and dry as you might think it is. So for instance, anybody have any guess what percentage of the things that are put in recycling bins in the United States are actually recycled? So you put your glass and your cans and your paper and your bottles in the recycling bin. What percentage are recycled?
15.
15. That's pretty good, right? Dead center of the middle of it, Abigail. Yeah, look, between 9 and 20%, depending on where you are in the country. In some places, it's as little as 9. In other places, it's as much as 20. It's pretty rare to have anywhere recycle more than 20% of what goes in. That's pretty low. That's a pretty low amount. Now, again, it depends on the material. It depends on whether or not your area, your town has a recycling facility. Some collect recyclables and they don't have anywhere to recycle them. So they just end up putting them in the trash. Now, there's a lot of factors that affect that low rate. Seeing that low rate does not mean that you should say, oh, there's no point in recycling. In fact, the opposite is true. We should see that low rate and try to figure out better ways to recycle, because there are some problems with recycling that if we could solve these problems, we would be up in the 70 to 80% of the recyclables being recycled at that point. So a couple of the problems that we have, we'll go into a little bit more detail about some of these, but one of them is a lot of recyclables are contaminated, either with things that can't be recycled or things that are hazardous, and that can contaminate the whole batch. Not everything has a strong demand in the market. There are some kinds of plastic that it's just not economically reasonable to recycle them. It costs way more to recycle them than it does to just make new. So somebody's not going to necessarily do that. And sorting can be a problem too. All right, so what we mean when we say recycling is taking these objects and using not the same object, that would be reusing, but the materials that they're made of from something new. And there are some ways that we can improve our recycling practices. So let's talk about how we can do that. First of all, we know that paper can be recycled to make new paper, aluminum can make new cans, and glass can be made to make new bottles and jars. You can find things in the supermarket that are like packaging that's made with recyclable materials. So when we do that, not only do we keep things out of our oceans and landfills, but we save the raw materials. So when we recycle metal cans, that means we don't have to get aluminum out of the rocks in order to be able to make new aluminum cans. All right, once you do recycle, after you put something in the recycling bin, it's taken away to a recycling factory, shredded into little pieces and melted down into pulp before it's being used to create something new. I want you guys to watch this video about a recycling center.
What actually happens to the stuff you put in the recycling bin? I've always been curious, so I decided to collect the recycling from our office and bring it to a recycling plant to find out. Follow me, we're going to find out the life of our recyclables as they go to a recycling plant. When I got to Sims Recycling Plant in Brooklyn, I found a huge warehouse where 800 tons of recyclables from all over New York are dropped off by barge and truck every day. The plant was built in 2013 and it is state-of-the-art. It handles materials like metals, glass, and hard plastics. And after those materials are dropped off, they're sorted.
So we take all of those unsorted recyclables and we're pushing it through our processing system, which is almost all automatic. It's about 2.5 miles worth of conveyor belts, magnets, cameras, all sorts of other machines dedicated to just sorting out different materials.
The sorting machine is very high tech and sorts 14 kinds of materials, like glass, aluminum, cartons, and different types of plastic. Once enough of a material is collected, it's compressed into a 1,000 to 1,500 pound block called a bale. After the bales are sorted, they're sold to third-party companies. For example, a bale of aluminum might sell for $800. Buyers then take that raw material, clean and process it, and turn it into something new. This process saves way more energy than mining for virgin materials. With the same amount of energy that it takes to make 1 can of new aluminum, you can make 20 cans from recycled aluminum. And using 1 ton of recycled plastic saves 16 barrels of oil.
You have to think about all this stuff as coming from the earth, right? There's natural resources, oil, and all these plastics. And once you put it in the trash, it's going to a landfill or it's going to an incinerator. You're never going to use that material again.
All right, so there are some advantages to recycling. Keeping things out of the landfill and reducing waste are big ones, but reducing energy use and air pollution are other ones that are pretty important. But there are some problems with recycling, and this video is going to show us.
Despite the great setup at Sims, there are a lot of issues with recycling. First of all, Americans kind of suck at it. According to the EPA, about 75% of all of our waste is actually recyclable, yet our recycling rates hang around 34% nationally. That basically means that only a third of every single thing we use and throw out every day is making it to the recycling bin.
There's a garbage can right outside our office. You can see there's paper and there's some cans in there, cups. All of these things are recyclable. And they're in the trash right when there's a recycling bin right next door.
Only about 50% of recyclables in New York City are getting recycled right now. And I think that's largely a result of maybe a lack of public education, the fact that the rules have changed over time. Maybe some people just don't care enough or don't know why they should care. And I think all of those kind of issues can really be addressed through education.
Sam also told me about another problem called wish cycling. That's when people put trash into the recycling bin, hoping it can be recycled, when in fact it cannot.
I would say it's about 10 to 13% of what we get is not something we want to receive. Those kinds of materials are maybe extra plastic bags, plastic film, maybe little bits of food scraps mixed in with those containers.
Wish cycling wastes a lot of energy and fuel because items are shipped to a plant like Sims, sorted, and then eventually just sent to the dump. Sam told me that another huge misconception about recycling are plastic bags.
We get about 18 tons of plastic bags here every single day. Ideally, we would be getting nothing.
Plastic bags are a low quality kind of plastic, which makes them really hard to resell. On top of that, the bags get stuck in the machine and can break it. So if you want to recycle your plastic shopping bags, go to a plastic drop-off at a retailer like Whole Foods.
18 tons of plastic bags in one recycling center in New York every day. That's pretty crazy. Plastic bags don't weigh very much. So one of the problems with recycling is the expense. It costs money to build and run a recycling center. And it takes a lot of people to sort that material. Now, one of the problems too is that not every kind of plastic can be recycled, and you need to understand the symbols so that you recycle correctly. Contamination is also a big deal when we're talking about recycling. We don't want to put two different kinds together. So glass and metal can't be recycled at the same time. If you have single stream recycling where everything in your recycling goes into one bin, they have to do this, the sorting at the recycling center. And that takes time. That costs money. Also, there are things like bicycle parts and car parts that just simply can't be recycled at all because they've got to lift different kinds of metal and they might be dirty. So things that are made out of different materials recycle differently and they have to be separated from one another. So if something like a car, part of a car is sent to the recycling center, you know, it just ends up in the landfill anyway. Also, not all glass is the same. Just because something's made of glass doesn't mean it can be recycled. The glass that's in light bulbs and mirrors and dishes and windows is different from the glass that you find in a jar or a bottle, and it can't be recycled. So if you recycle glass things that are not recyclable, somebody has to sort them out at the recycling center. And if they've all broken and mixed together, the whole batch has to be thrown away. So plastic's a big one because not all places will accept all types of plastic. Have you guys ever noticed that there are on plastic things numbers? There's a number on the bottom inside a little triangle usually. Well, your recycling center will only recycle some numbers. So if you put the wrong type in the bin, somebody has to take it out, and that does a lot of work. So most of you probably have a bin like this that you set on the curb on certain days of the week. And your city is going to send a truck, which is going to pick that recycling up and send it away. But you have to do some stuff to your things that you recycle before you put them in that bin in order for them to be recycled. For one thing, you have to clean them. You can't just throw dirty things in there. Things that are going in a recycling bin shouldn't have food or grease on them. So you need to check with your town to find out what kinds of things they recycle and only put those things in your recycling bin. So remember that if you put something in your bin that's not recyclable, you're just making it harder for somebody at the recycling center. You're doing what they called wish cycling. So things that are dirty need to be cleaned. Even water should be emptied out of a water bottle. You shouldn't put a half full water bottle into your recycling bin. You should dump the water out. So here are the numbers that plastics can come in, 1 up through 7. So did any of you guys know what numbers your city recycles? You know how to find out? What would you do if you wanted to know whether or not you can throw a 3 in your recycling bin or not? Look online, ask the internet, right? You can check your city's waste management website. So just type waste management and the name of your city, and it'll give you a website that'll give you either the information or a number to call to find out. You can also call local recycling centers, or you can find their websites and they might tell you. Sometimes the recycling bin might even have instructions right on the side of it. So plastic is complicated because look at that. There's 7 different numbers on them. Most recycling centers will accept 1s and 2s, but beyond that, rarely or never accepted. So you need to find out so that you put the right thing in. All right, let's talk about some recycling rules here. So rule number 1, no bags of any kind. So grocery bags dissolve into these potentially harmful microplastics. They're pretty much the worst thing that you could recycle because even though they are technically recyclable, they will jam or tangle the machinery at recycling centers. So you have to take them to a place that is just for these kind of bags, that has the exact right equipment. So you have to go to a drop-off center in order to do that. A lot of grocery stores will have those drop-off centers. But here's the way you can think of it. If a piece of plastic, something made of plastic is soft enough that you can poke your finger through it, it shouldn't be recycled. That also means you shouldn't put your recycling stuff in bags. So don't use trash bags to contain your recycling. Instead, you should dump them right into your blue bins or whatever your recycling container that you have is. You also shouldn't recycle small things, anything littler than a credit card. So things like bottle caps and coffee pods and even things like plastic silverware is just too small. to be sorted. It can jam the recycling equipment. Like I said, things have to be clean, empty, and dry. Food waste contaminates whole loads of recyclables, making them useless. In fact, food waste right now contaminates about 25% of all of our recycling. Once it's contaminated, it has to be just taken to a landfill. So if you can't get it clean, like these, like pizza boxes, you can't get that clean. You can't get these takeout containers clean. You just don't want to recycle them. If they can't be cleaned, they can't be recycled. Combining trash, combining these materials. Recycling only works when materials are recycled together. So things like plastic coated coffee cups, or the bubble wrap that have the plastic bubble wrap covered by paper envelopes, those can't ever be separated. So they're trash. They have to be thrown away. And the plastics, you just have to know what your plastic numbers are. You have to know what your township will accept, or your city, or your municipality will accept, and definitely stop the wish cycling. So one of the worst things you can do is optimistically put something in the recycling bin, hoping that it's recyclable. So a lot of people do that, but it actually makes things worse. It makes more work for the people at the recycling center, and it could contaminate a whole batch of stuff. And then finally, at the end of the day, we can't know everything. There's a bunch of stuff that we accumulate in our lives that we just don't necessarily know whether or not we could recycle or not. So if you're not sure, look it up and help to spread the word. Help people to know what's okay and what's not to recycle. So knowing the things that are okay to put in the recycling bin and helping others know that is important. And of course, we have to talk about this because it's real new. This big problem with e-waste. So e-waste refers to the technology that we throw away. So think about when you get a new cell phone. What do you do with your old one? Anybody ever gotten a new cell phone?
Yeah.
Where's the old one now?
It went to my little sister.
Yeah, good. That's exactly the right thing to do. Giving it to someone else, letting someone reuse it. What about a new computer? Have you ever gotten a new computer or a new TV or an iPad or a new game system? Think about what you do with the old one. So newer technology replaces older technology really, really fast. And sometimes companies stop supporting devices, so you don't have any choice but to buy a new one. So that becomes a problem. So this waste from old electronic equipment is called e-waste, and it's really a growing problem, not just in the United States, but around the world. So it is the fastest growing waste in the United States. And it's all these things that we use and dispose of often. So look at this number right here, just computers alone. It's estimated that Americans throw out 130,000 computers every day. That's a crazy number every day, and just in America. Ever since the invention of the iPhone, cell phones have become the top source of e-waste because cell phones are considered disposable. They're really not made to last more than a couple years. And cell phone companies do that on purpose because they want you to buy a new one. It's how they make their money. So they give these products a short lifespan because they know you're going to want something new. And they know that you'll buy it if they make it. They actually have a name for that. It's called planned obsolescence, where they plan on you getting tired of your phone and wanting a new one within a couple years. Many people are going to want the newest thing. So more than 4.14 million smartphones are sold every day in the world. That makes 1.5 billion every year. And the ones that we're replacing are often just thrown away. And that's just the phones. Now let's talk about all the packaging, plastic and paper and styrofoam. All of that is stuff that just goes into the landfills. But the phones are a big problem. The computers are a big problem because they have chemicals in them that can leak into the environment if they're not disposed of properly. So there's a way you should dispose of them and a way that you don't. Well, right now, most e-waste ends up in landfills. We have laws to prevent it from going there, but people throw things away anyway. You know, if you put an old video game system in a plastic bag and throw it away, you know, the company doesn't open every plastic bag to see if there's e-waste in it. Another problem is that we're shipping a lot of our e-waste to other countries, and then they end up in landfills in other countries. So that might not be the best solution for them or for us. Some of the problem is that electronic equipment can be recycled, but it's hard. It's hard to do that. In order to recycle this e-waste, they have to take it apart, and that can be really expensive. Now, some parts of the e-waste might have really, really precious metals in them, like gold or silver or copper. It might be profitable to recycle them, but right now it's just too hard to do. It's just too hard to do, so it's a lot easier for them to just be thrown away. And this electronic equipment is not built with recycling in mind. So it would be nice if they would make phones thinking about how can we make it easier to recycle these things, but right now that's not the case. They're not doing it. And often e-waste will contain valuable and scarce materials. So have you guys heard of rare earth elements? Rare earth elements are used in electronics. There's about 15 elements that are used to make electronic parts and small magnets. They're called rare earth, not because they're rare, but because they're scattered. They're just found in little tiny amounts all throughout the crust of the earth. So getting them and purifying them takes a lot of time and a lot of money. It's not like there's a gold mine somewhere where you can just go in and mine these rare earth minerals. They have to find them. So if we could take these electronic equipment apart and get those rare earth elements out, that would be a good thing. But right now, that's not happening. And of course, the companies that make this new electronic equipment, they want you to buy their stuff. They're encouraging you to get a new phone. They're telling you things like, you've earned it. Live the creative life redefined. Choose your escape route, right? They want you to get a new computer, even though your old computer might be working just fine. And the problem is, the more we buy, the more we throw away. So what can we do about all this? What can you do as a person? That's always the question, isn't it? What can I do? I'm just one person. I really don't like the doom and gloom approach to ecology and environmental science. I think human beings are very resourceful. When we see a problem, we get to work fixing it, and we often find a solution. What we need to do is make sure that people actually see this problem. So that's where education comes in. And there's a lot of different ways that we can educate people. Some people just really don't know. They don't know that they can't recycle pizza boxes. They don't know that things should be cleaned before they're thrown into the recycling. For people like that who just don't know that they should recycle and that there are rules about recycling, sometimes just giving them a little bit of an ecology lesson might be helpful. A lot of people think it doesn't matter. I'm just one person. It's not going to make a difference at all. For those people, getting them to do something is better than doing nothing. Some people think it's just too difficult. So if you set a good example, they can see your recycling bin day after day when they walk down your street. That can help them see it's not that hard to make a big difference. So some things we can do. First of all, the best thing to do is just not buy too much in the first place. Think carefully before you buy new electronic equipment. Do you really need that new gadget? How can you extend the life of your electronics? How can you make sure that your tablet lasts longer? Keep it clean. Maybe buy a case for it. Avoid overcharging the battery. Take good care of it. Don't leave it where somebody can step on it. Trying to protect what you currently have so that you don't have to buy more is an important thing. And then when you do get something new, think carefully about how you're going to get rid of the old one, who you're going to give it to. Don't just, without thinking, throw it into the trash can. Here's some things that you can do when you're done with an electronic device. You can donate it to a charity, give it to a company that has a recycling program, give it to a friend or family member, keep it as a backup, or find out what the manufacturer's recycling processes are. So some large charities have programs where they'll reuse or recycle old electronic equipment. So giving your old equipment that's working, but is just like you don't want it anymore, is much better than throwing it away. There is this number that you can look this up, Call to Recycle. And this is a nonprofit organization that has drop-off centers throughout the world or throughout the US for rechargeable batteries and cell phones. That's primarily what they will collect. Best Buy, if you have a Best Buy in your area, they are the nation's largest retail collector of e-waste. And they have collected about 2.5 billion pounds of e-waste and appliances, and they recycle those. Staples is another one. If you have a Staples in your town, all the US Staples stores will recycle at least something. And many townships are going to provide recycling services as well. So that is something to consider. All right. Anybody have any questions about recycling or waste, or what are your thoughts about all this? You know, can you come up with another way to get rid of waste than the 4 that we talked about?
Not really a way to get rid of waste, but a way to recycle. So I was talking to my grandparents because
You got a lot of static with your voice there. Maybe back up a little bit.
can you hear me?
Yeah,
Is that good?
it's real staticky too.
I will send it in the chat.
Okay, you can go ahead and talk. Just maybe talk a little softer.
A way to reuse materials.
Yeah,
My grandparents, they make quilts and they send their scraps to a charity center that uses fabric scraps to make dog beds and cat beds.
that's excellent. That's excellent. Fabric is one. There are some places that will take your old clothes and they will recycle that into new fabric to make new clothes. And that's something you can buy. You know, you can go online and find companies that do that. So that's a good way. Once again, there are whole groups of people who try to find different ways to reuse and repurpose things. So rather than going out and buying a new dresser, go to a thrift shop and see if you can buy a used one and give new life to an old product. Yeah, that's an excellent thing. Abigail, do you help? Do you sew quilts?
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So that's there's a lot of different ways that you can be a part of this, and it really does matter. I know you're just one person, but if everybody does something, then it can make a big difference. So anybody else, any other thoughts? All right, we're done a little bit early today. Don't get into trouble with your 5 minutes that you have left, okay? I'll let you go now. All right. Have a great week, everybody. Good to see you.
Thank you. You too. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.